because otherwise it's just not fair. And I know there's some people who have to catch flights. And so I'm going to introduce Mr. Mark Mogley. Is it Mowgli or Mogley? Mogul. Oh gosh, okay. Sorry about that, Mogul. Mark has traveled all the way from Washington, and he is a US Department of Justice's International Cricker towards quality assurance, because we can talk about the most amazing technology and crime scene investigation, but unless the quality of your samples is good enough for presentation in court, or for courts to rely on it for identification purposes, then we've got a really weak point in our chain. So Mark has supported forensic development in over 30 countries, including many that have actually achieved international accreditation, and he's currently working in Kenya, and I'm sure he'll tell you other countries. Prior to ICITAP, Mark worked in the Pennsylvania State Police and assisted laboratory. That laboratory achieved accreditation, and he is a member of the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors and the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. So thank you so much for traveling all this way to present here. And so glad to finally meet you in person, because all of our correspondence over the years has always been over email. And it's great to have the opportunity of having you in Cape Town. Sorry about the really bad weather. And over to you. And yeah, thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
So thank you, Vanessa, and it's great to be here in Cape Town. Somebody should have told me it was winter before I agreed to come, but it's such a beautiful city, and yeah, I really appreciate the invitation to talk about our work. For those that don't know our organization, so our office works with foreign law enforcement across the board. It could be from academy development to financial crimes to wildlife, trafficking, and forensics is a piece of the work that we do, and we'll work in all areas of forensic science, and quality and accreditation is a theme across all the work that we do. And I hope to explain a bit about our approach and the value that we have seen in regional collaboration to support the development of quality management systems in various countries. So, as Vanessa said, I started my career with the Pennsylvania State Police, and I won't go into it, but Pennsylvania is known as the Keystone State. And I also like the concept of forensic science being the bridge from the crime scene to the court. And so you are helping connect the crime scene and the investigators, gathering that information, putting context to it, and delivering it to the court. And so I like that sort of analogy of a keystone, because without your work, that bridge from the crime scene to the court really would not exist. And why do I say that? So our work supports a number of different topics that are important to the international community, but I always ask people to think about the public confidence in the criminal justice system that's created by reliable forensic and independent evidence that's being presented in court, not necessarily relying on testimonial evidence, coerced confessions, etc. And the international community talks a lot about, you'll hear terms like accountability and access to justice. And if you think about a sexual assault survivor in a country that has no DNA capability, would they really want to present and go to the police and report that crime, knowing that it's very difficult to have independent evidence to support their case? You know, most cases, probably not. So in a way, I mean, the people in this room, the people that work in the laboratories, you in of yourselves are a form of access to justice. So the work that you do is incredibly important. So some of the places that we're currently working, you can see, I think maybe about 4 or 5 different continents there, particularly in Africa. We've been working in Somalia, and we are just beginning to work again in Kenya and Niger. And besides these countries, we've worked in numerous countries around the world on very different topics, from processing of mass graves to all the way to the anthropology, to DNA, to digital evidence and cyber crimes, to drug trafficking, you know, what have you. And through all this, we have seen the value of quality assurance and building in that that level of sustainability and the quality management into our work. So here's how we sort of think about our support. I mean, I think that's our goal for our partner laboratories, and I think it's probably our partner laboratories' goals as well. And our counterparts in the development world often probably think about capability. Do the labs have equipment and training? But they think less about reliability. Are there quality assurance processes in place? And I'll touch on it later on. I think we've heard a bit about it this week on the timeliness. Are we actually providing results to the investigators, or providing those matches in a way that we are aiding the investigations? And you know, the worst thing we want to see is that we have evidence in our laboratory that could be analyzed, and while it's sitting there, other crimes are being, you know, committed when we have everything that we need to potentially solve the case. And the thread running through this is management. And I really should put on here leadership and management, because one of the sayings that we have in sort of the forensic community in the US is that you can manage processes, but you lead people. And it's sort of a very different approaches. So why is accreditation important to the work we do? Well, one, just for the sustainability. So we might provide a lot of technical training and mentoring, and all that gets incorporated into SOPs. But in reality, I want to point out the continuous improvement model that is the foundation of the ISO requirements. That only helps us get to the laboratory position where they're doing really quality work, but then also setting them up for success, so that as new technology comes on board, they can adapt that and implement it in a quality and reliable way. So why is, just to reiterate, the importance of accreditation? So, you know, for us, this is a standard we try to hold ourselves to. And 10, 15, more like 20 years ago, we've had some certain challenges in our forensic laboratories. Some might say scandals, so much so that our Congress asked our National Academy of Sciences to produce a report on how we can improve forensic science in the United States. So this report was issued in 2009, but some of the recommendations still hold and and are relevant to the general forensic community. And I just highlighted a couple of recommendations. So our National Academy of Sciences is telling Congress that laboratory accreditation should be mandatory for all forensic laboratories. And then they go through in recommendation 8 to sort of explain what the quality assurance program should try to do. And it's not only us that holds accreditation as important. It's really important to the European Union as well. It's actually something that they look through for states that want to ascend to membership in the EU. One of the projects that we had was in Bulgaria, and we are actually partnering with another EU country, because what the EU does is set up what they call a twinning project. So they will pair a lab from a member country with one of the countries that is looking to ascend to help on that accreditation piece. And we were there working as well. I captured this from 2016 that talks about a little bit accreditation in a little bit more of an expanded role. 2016, you got to think about the context of it. This is when ISIS attacks in Europe were happening, and they particularly highlighted the European Union Council that beyond traditional forensics, that they needed to look at accreditation on digital evidence and evidence that's held within electronic databases, so that member states could effectively share that information between countries. So over the years, we've had a lot of success. There's some of the countries that we've supported with accreditation. Some of these labs we've started along the accreditation process, and the country was not yet accredited when our project ended, but they continued on, showed their determination, and ended up getting accredited on their own without us. And if anyone's watching online from Tanzania, the government chemists there just recently got accreditation for their DNA unit. So I want to publicly congratulate them on that. Yes, thank you. And they did a lot of that work on their own. So congratulations. And we've worked in all areas, not just DNA, but some areas that are a little bit more challenging, like crime scene. I'll point out, we are working in Mexico at the state level. It's a federal system, and they have 32 states. And so I think we have like 16 states in Mexico that have an accredited crime scene unit, as well as most of them, we have an accredited crime scene unit in Panama as well. So this is helping not only with DNA, but establishing quality when we're talking about that process, the importance of having connectivity and quality from the crime scene to the courtroom. That is part of that. And so what is our approach to this? One of the things that we try to do is demystify the ISO requirements. And if you purchase a copy of ISO 17025 or 17020, it may seem daunting, maybe 200 requirements, you need to have a policy for that, or the laboratory needs to account for this, and it's written very vaguely. So we try to sort of simplify that. And we have mapped out sort of a 10-step process to show it's really not that difficult. With a little bit of coaching along the way, many laboratories can actually achieve accreditation. And we also use the 3 Ps that Bruce had mentioned yesterday. You need a policy, a procedure, and proof. And that proof is a part that a lot of the countries that we work with get caught up on. They'll have everything in place and they're doing everything right. They're just not documenting what they're doing to really show the auditors. And we really focus on a peer relationship, and I think that'll show through on some of our collaborations, that these are international standards. They're not from the United States, they're not from the European Union, that these are sort of the common standards that from Asia to Africa to Latin America, that we're all sort of working towards and striving to meet. And then when we have those successes, it's really important for us to sort of push those folks out into the public and take their rightful place as a member of the forensic community, and really show that, because again, it just reinforces that this is not the standard of the United States. This is a joint sort of target for the international forensic community. And we've also developed local assessors. So in Mexico and Central America, we've developed lead assessors that are Mexican, speak Spanish, that are going and doing the accreditation inspections. And I will highlight that our accreditations in Latin America, in Mexico, many of the countries in Central America, this is the same accrediting body that accredits the FBI laboratory. And so having our counterparts in Mexico doing this is really important. But to show it's a peer relationship, some of our lead assessors that are Mexican have been on accreditation inspections of US laboratories. So it's actually Mexican auditors, because these are international standards. It's nothing that says that the auditor has to be an American. They're participating in doing the audits of the some of the labs in the US. And so when I say we have a 10-step process, just to demystify it, starting off with defining the scope of accreditation. And I won't read through all of these, but I'll point out, number 3, validate your analytical method or your methods. That could be a struggle, but this is a really important point where collaboration can be helpful. And so to give an example, we had helped to credit the DNA section and the chemistry section in Costa Rica, and we were working on the firearms section. And the supervisor told me she's struggling with the validation and how to set up their experiments. And she wasn't really sure what the auditors would be looking for and expect. So what I told her was that there's a accreditation inspection coming up in Guadalajara, Mexico, and we're going to take you there, spend a couple days. You can observe that audit as a third-party observer, and then review the validation data with their firearms unit. So we did that. We spent 2 days in Guadalajara, Mexico. And when we were leaving, she said, "Mark, thank you. You just saved me about 5 months worth of work." And that wasn't me taking them to the US. That was just Mexicans sharing with Costa Ricans and really accelerating that process. So the second 6 steps, number 6, internal auditing. One of the things that we might do is provide that training on how to do internal audits. But I'll also point out an opportunity for exchanges is just when you're starting into the accreditation and you think you want to do it, and we give the training on the ISO standards, but I say they're very complex. But we're actually talking about a quality management system. So what can be helpful is to go to another laboratory that is accredited and see how all these requirements actually play out on a day-to-day basis. How does the SOPs in the evidence receiving area impact what is being done in DNA, et cetera, whether it's environmental monitoring or what have you. So I often say somebody can tell me what Cape Town looks like, or I can see Cape Town. So I can train somebody on the ISO standards, but what does that actually look like as a system on a functional day-to-day basis? Sometimes it's just really helpful to go and see it. The other thing I wanted to highlight, and Brigadier Smith talked about the ISO 9001, and which really is the foundational management principles. If you look at these, you know, some of these things don't necessarily come naturally to a laboratory or a government institution for that matter. You know, things about customer focus and mutually beneficial relationships and involvement of people. What this is really asking us to do is create a culture of quality in a laboratory, and that may require a little bit of a shift of a mindset. And to sort of give you an example of what I mean by that, I was in a laboratory that we weren't necessarily working with, but they wanted some advice. They are working towards accreditation and they weren't quite getting there. And we just happened to get on the topic of peer reviews, and the person said to me, like, we want to do peer reviews, but you know what happens when we do peer reviews is the scientists butt heads. And I said to them, there's a couple ways you can look at this, and this is really, you know, on him. This one scientist can look at the person doing the peer review as challenging their work, you know, as a scientist, or they could look at it as this person is helping me and ultimately protecting me and getting my report and my case file correct before I go to court. And then I run into Bruce or Antonell or somebody else, and then that is, you know, a worse scenario than somebody doing it in a friendly manner in the laboratory. They're actually, you know, helping them out and protecting them and ensuring not only them, the reputation of their laboratory as well. So some of those things, it might need to set that culture. And one of the things that we've learned in the United States is that people are often promoted in the laboratory because they're good scientists, not necessarily because they are good managers or have good people skills. And when we are talking about this from a process and trying to engage with others or change the culture in the laboratory to sort of, when there's a problem, not bury it, but bring it forward, and having supervisors look at, you know, problems as opportunities to improve the system. You know, it's really people skills that we really need to improve, and everybody can improve their people skills. And it's not something that it may come naturally to some, but you can actually learn, you know, and always improve your ability. So we've done this with training. We've provided training, similar training in Mexico and Costa Rica, and then empowered them to take this course and adapt it and put it into a Latin American context and deliver it to their peers. And I personally actually think their course is now better than what we have with the ASCLD one. But for the last 3 years, our counterparts in Mexico and Costa Rica have been delivering leadership and management training to their peers in usually about 5 or 6 countries at one time. And then those leaders are coming together and working on a day-to-day basis and just really connecting that fabric of that professional community in Latin America, making it a little bit stronger day by day. I mentioned timeliness earlier. We also have to account for that quality and timeliness are really in tension, but there's some things that we can do to address that as well. And so the laboratory in Costa Rica approached me about wanting to do Lean Six Sigma project. So they are working through accreditation, because they're working on developing SOPs, et cetera, their backlog slowly creeped up. And you can see that, and they wanted to do some process improvement. So we invested in some training. I think we originally trained 2 people, then the next year we trained 4, and they brought down their backlog of cases in the laboratory that were in the laboratory 90 days. They brought that down by 95%. Really powerful. And they then go and amplify for that for us. So they wrote a paper for Forensic Science International, which is one of the free ones, so you can go and download it. If you want a copy, my email is going to be at the end. You can email me and I'll send you a copy of that document. They've provided webinars in English and Spanish. And most recently, there's a group from Spain that were there giving them some training on mixture interpretation. The Spanish were greatly impressed by their process and their efficiency. And then the Spanish invited them to go to Spain and deliver some training in Madrid, Barcelona, and Seville. And coming up, we are going to have the Costa Ricans are going to train the Colombians on this base 2-day training. And then there's going to be a series of about 6 months of the Colombians and Spanish are going to get trained by Costa Ricans. As it's more not so training, but coaching them through a project and taking a project and putting it through the Lean Six Sigma process. And then lastly, I just want to touch on Kenya, just because they've chosen to embark on this accreditation journey with us. And so we are really excited to work with them, both the government chemist and the DCI, and hopefully on some databasing issues as well. And so if there's folks from Kenya on the line, thank you. We really value your partnership and looking forward to going on this journey. And with that, I'll just leave a quote from one of our greatest Americans, and you'll see that your work really does uplift humanity, and because of that, we really have to strive as a community to undertake it with painstaking excellence. So thank you.
Thanks so much. I just realized that actually, when you mentioned that we had met in Japan, I think over COVID, you met so many new people online that you actually, I don't know if anyone else had that experience. You forget who you've met in person and who you haven't met. It was this weird sort of blur over those years, because we actually made so many more connections during COVID than we would ordinarily have done. Thank you so much for the amazing work that you're doing. Keeping with quality assurance, we now have Innocent Makasa from Zambia, who's the chief forensic scientist in that laboratory, and also actually completing his PhD at the University of Cape Town. I think one of Laura Heathfield's students too, more publications. And he advocates for the routine application of DNA analysis and really supports statutory enforcement of quality standards to combat misuse of forensic science. Not only misuse, but the misapplication, I suppose, is also a good word for that. And really is dedicated to establishing the Zambian autosomal and gonosomal DNA population databases. So that's an amazing thing to have your own allele frequency database in your own country. So well done to you, Innocent, for spearheading that. He's going to be presenting Pioneers, Africa's first forensic science regulator in Zambia. It's quite a remarkable achievement what Innocent has done. So please take some time to listen to what he's done. And he's also going to touch on a project that we're involved in, a global project that ranges from Texas. Maybe that's why I had Botswana the same size as the state of Texas on my mind. From Texas to the University of Leicester, to South Africa, to Zambia now, and it incorporates really the donation of surplus evidence collection kits to low resource environments. And I have to say thank you to, I call him my swab mule, to Professor Bruce Bonoli, who literally has taken boxes of these evidence collection, these surplus collection kits, which our amazing nurse in Texas, Jennifer Degner, gets across to Bruce, and he brings them through customs, and he always goes, okay, here I go, I'm going through customs. And I think they stopped you. They did stop you, but they let you through. And I thank you. You never complain. Normally you have carry on. And I always say, can you bring a suitcase or can you bring a box? Just doing that is going to be making a huge difference. And he's laughing. And Innocent's going to tell you how Zambia have now become the second country to be involved in this project. So welcome back to Cape Town, Innocent, and thank you for presenting with us today.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Vanessa, for having me, and UNODC and ICRC. I would want to just start with informing you all that the two ways we have in Zambia, or let me just say in Africa, we have the Mos Otunya, the Victoria Falls. So there are two ways in which you can view or see the Mos Otunya, the smoke that thunders. One way is to check online and you find the pictures. The other way is to go closer to the Mos Otunya. I'll not tell you which country you can use to go closer to the Mos Otunya and see it. But there's only one way to experience it, is to visit Zambia. And the Livingstone. So you come to Zambia and experience the smoke that thunders. Today I have a very simple task. Most of the things, or most of my presentations have been covered in the previous speakers, starting from Bruce, my brother, on the 12th. Before I go into my presentation today, I want to just highlight the importance of the newly established forensic DNA laboratory in Zambia. So last week, I have no slides for this. I've dedicated five minutes to Vanessa, and this is Vanessa's work I'm doing right now. We were launching the first ever forensic DNA laboratory in Zambia, dedicated to analyzing forensic DNA samples or evidential material from victims and survivors of rape and violent crimes. Before we did the commissioning and do the internal validation of processes, we went out because I was privileged to be at UCT and I had privileged to interact with the pathologists who deal with victims and survivors of rape. And I saw how they lamented how they never involved or how they wished to be involved in the selection of the collection kit. So we took a deliberate move as a country to reach out to medical officers who are examining victims of rape and violent cases in Zambia, and ask them how they wished the rape kit, if you wish to call it that way, or the safe kit if you're in Zimbabwe, the composition of that safe kit. And what came out in that interaction with them is two things. One is that these people are more trained on medical procedures and less on forensic procedures and on their to-hand of forensic evidential material. Two is that they are overwhelmed with work. These are not officers who are dedicated to do forensic work. So they do part-time forensic examination of sexual crimes victims, whereas the other part, they do attend to medical cases at the facilities. And the needs pointed to the sexual kit that we want to introduce in Zambia, which we gladly, through Journey for Africa and Leicester University, we got the donation of the kit that does not require processes of drying, for example, because most facilities in Zambia, they're not forensic facilities, so they don't have facilities to dry the swabs when they collect, for example. So this kit, we're glad through, again, Bruce, my brother, thank you very much for taking trouble to transport the over 20 kg box of the kits to us, which I'll receive and take to Zambia. Thank you. And to Vanessa and the team for the donation of this kit. This translates to that we were talking about the cost of processing sexual crimes, especially the reagents when it comes to DNA reagents. So our laboratories would cut the cost of the collection kit because that's part of the cost. And also we are trying to optimize the reduced volume analysis in the laboratory on reference samples. If we optimize that process, plus the cost-effective or cheaper sexual assault kit, I guess we will be economic in the way we run and support the sexual assault victims and survivors. I guess that's more than 5 minutes. So most of the things today have been discussed. Getting back to my reason why I'm here is just to talk about the regulation of forensic science. Last month, we had at Zambia a chance to talk or speak with the regulator of forensic service in the UK, and we had interesting discussions. You may wish to know that most of the things I want to speak, especially regarding the importance of forensic science, most of these things, you know them, and most of these things have been adequately articulated by my previous speakers. So I'll just run through you like the publication, the things that the media talk about in terms of the importance of forensic science when it comes to resolving or in the criminal justice system, resolving crimes in the criminal justice system. So this is very interesting for me. In India, a government official was prescribing mandatory examination of mandatory forensic examination of evidential material in cases that attract 6 years of imprisonment. So you can see the extent of how even politicians had to forensic science. So forensic science, and because also the effects of the CSI, everyone thinks forensic science is the golden bullet, it's reliable, and therefore can be trusted to be used even in the environmental crimes, for example, to resolve environmental crimes. Like imagine you are littering, and then they get the litter, do a DNA analysis, go into the database, and then they get to you. So that just shows the importance of forensic science. However, there's a problem. Forensic science evidence is only as good as the processes that produced it. So there must be integrity. And now we see this problem. The problem mostly highlighted by the Innocence Project in the USA. And we saw how sometimes even the role of forensic science, or this application of it, played in convicting innocent people. And that was a statistic at some point where they saw that 45% of the wrongful convictions were as a result of misapplication of forensic science. So those are just some of the number of cases where forensic science were misapplied. Colleagues, I'm glad that Mark presented earlier before this. Some of these laboratories were accredited laboratories. But then accreditation is just one way. But there must be another way to reinforce accreditation process. It's very important. Those were just, again, some of the examples from the laboratories where they have a system that detects fraud. But if your laboratory has never reported fraud, it's not because fraud is not happening, maybe it's because you have no system in place to detect fraud. So you can't say, no, it's just happening in the USA. I can assure you this is happening in South Africa, this is happening in Zambia, this is happening in Uganda, wherever there is forensic DNA analysis. So there has been cause for regulation. And this cause, when I was checking, I traced them from 1991. And also in 2007, UK established the first ever forensic regulator. The forensic regulator, which was established in the UK, had no statutory powers to enforce the standards. But I think now they have. They've worked on the act, and they've given their regulator statutory powers to not only develop standards, but also enforce them on the laboratories. I'll rush through the Tanzania in Zambia has, in 2009, they established what they called a human DNA regulator, which they placed it in the chief government chemist. So the chief government chemist in Tanzania is also offering forensic laboratory services to the state. Now, if you give him the powers to regulate, it's like somebody is a referee and a player at the same time. And this act excludes him actually to be regulated. So then, and these are the people who are analyzing samples for forensic use. And then they are not regulated, they're not covered in the regulation system. So yes, it's regulating private practice, but then what about the government practice? So Zambia we looked at Tanzania, we looked at the UK, and we designed our own system, the regulator system. So in 2020, a law was enacted in which the National Forensic Authority was established. And the National Forensic Authority had the powers to regulate all service providers, be it public or government or private laboratories. This then means that laboratories like Orcas Lab can now be regulated by a state organization. SAPS, for example, if it's in South Africa, can now be regulated. And if you are within the established standards and regulations, then it means if, for example, the police have a backlog of samples, they can go to Orcas laboratory and then run the samples, because it's the same, they're following the same standard, national standard, and they have the same regulator, so, and the same system, and they prescribe to the same penal, the penal code. So it means if a scientist in Orcas laboratory commits fraud, or indeed in the SAPS laboratory, they will be subjected to the same legal system, the same penalties, and everything the same. So the regulator we gave them, they were given also powers to enter and search. So they can come to your facility randomly, whenever they wished, if they have some information, and then inspect the quality standards and the systems that you are using. There are offenses if you lie to the inspectors. There are offenses if you obstruct inspectors from performing their duties. Those are some of the offenses. Is it the golden bullet? Certainly not. So the regulator should just be one of the many ways of ensuring that quality and objectivity of forensic science is delivered. So you can have accreditation as part of it. You can have self-regulation. All the labs have the system of self-regulate or the duty to self-regulate. And also you use the expert evidence admissibility criteria, which in Zambia we don't have at the moment. So we have no admissibility criteria for the expert evidence, testimony or opinion. So anyone who parades themselves as an expert in court and they've undertaken an expert process, a forensic process, they're admitted. Those are the offenses. If you contravened the powers to inspect. Yeah, so the benefits of regulation, I'm almost done. So it's, so those are just part of the benefits, but we have realized in Zambia that benefits actually are more than just what I've highlighted in this slide. One of it is that when the regulator establishes standards, then they compel government to support or fund the institutions that are running forensic services in the country to catch up to the standard set. So that's what we were lacking. We're lacking a body which is independent of laboratory work, forensic lab work, to engage our politicians who are in charge of the funding and also articulate the importance of forensic service to the criminal justice system. So currently, even in South Africa, I've noticed this, you have to wait for maybe an organization to lobby for you for funding. When they see a problem and that problem persists, that's when you are, then there's maybe a public outcry, and that's when the government is engaged to fund, to reduce the backlog. But this time around, it will be the regulator for us. When they see the backlog, they go back to government and politicians. And immediately, I'm sure, solicit for funds channel to the laboratories and then reduce the backlog. So in conclusion, so it's the duty of each forensic provider to guard against the misuse of forensic science. Until the regulator is in place, I know we don't want to be regulated. Until then, let's self-regulate. Let's put some integrity in the work we're doing. I always say that if the forensic service is below the acceptable standard, don't offer it. Because if you offer a substandard service, the lawyers, the court will have a false sense of security. They would think you did the correct thing and they will rely on your evidence. Better you don't give them that option so that they use other pieces of evidence in the case to prosecute or to investigate. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, I'm Vanessa's stunt double. I'm looking good, thank you. No, I want to take the opportunity here of introducing Dr. Antonella Alcas. When we started looking at development of capacity in forensic systems in Africa for the ICRC, one of the ambitions we had right from 2015 is to create a formal forensic practitioner network. We wanted to get Africans to start becoming a community, a forensic community. And so it was very important for us to look at how we bring all forensic scientists into a group. Now, there was another group already that was primarily for forensic doctors, but we wanted something that really encapsulated all of forensics. And so in December, we had a workshop to try and create some sort of Pan-African Academy. And there's absolutely no way that we would have succeeded if it wasn't for Dr. Antonella Alkes and her guidance through this workshop to establish the African Forensic Sciences Academy. In that short amount of time, she'll give you, I don't want to steal the thunder here, but in that short amount of time, it's absolutely amazing what AFSA has become and what it could be in the next few years for African forensic practitioners. So I would like to welcome Dr. Antonella Alkes, but I also just want to recognize both her and Professor Mehdi Ben Khalid, who have led this for the last few months with the interim leadership for AFSA. So Dr. Antonella, thank you so much, and please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I always say I need no long introductions. At my age, I'm Antonella, I'm going to talk. but thank you very much, Stephen. I also will recognize my colleagues as we go along. I truly believe AFSA is a new era for forensic sciences in Africa, and I'm going to share with you why I think so. There will be slides handed out, I'm sure. Please read it. Importantly, I'm noting here for you that the entire interim executive of AFSA, and we are 5, we do this pro bono. I am in the private sector, as you heard yesterday. Nobody makes money from this. You do it because you're utterly invested in your profession, period. I want one day, when I rest my head, I want to leave my profession better off than what I inherited it. And so we all said that we will volunteer our time. So this is what I'm going to talk about. Instead of just showing you that, I just want to explain that the QR code takes you to our, it says newsletter, but it's the database. So please join AFSA. Let us change things in Africa. On the table outside, you'll also see there's QR codes lying around. Some is for membership, some is for, but if you go to the website, if you give us your email address, we will start to keep you up to date. So why AFSA? Forensic sciences, as you know better than anybody else, has been discrepantly practiced over Africa. It's not the same. There's no network. There's no way in which we communicated effectively in the past. And the absence of this collegial and united structure, before AFSA, it was just fragmented. And so what we need is a voice for everybody in forensic science. And I stress this, it must be all forensic science practitioners. It doesn't help if it's only one group or one specialty. And then, of course, throughout the entire Africa. So we want to build a network that is basically in one word. If somebody asks me, give me one word of what AFSA will be, we will be a network, period. We will point you to the training. We will point you to the experts who can help you. It's not going to be us doing that. That's the current thoughts within AFSA. We want to support you, the forensic science practitioners in AFSA, in Africa, and so that we can enhance justice and humanitarian efforts in Africa. So as Stephen said to you, some of you in the audience, I'm looking at Anthony Wally. Anthony and I have, Anthony, can I say it has been 2 decades that we've been talking about starting a Pan-African body. So Donald Mshowe, where are you, Donald? You and I have been talking for years and years, my friend. Donald is the one that keeps on saying, no, it must happen, it must happen. So some of you have been here. Fortunately, when I met Stephen Fonseca, Stephen was the one who literally could action us to get, okay, let's really do this. And I credit the ICRC for sponsoring our founding meeting then in December of 2022. And it was in Pretoria in South Africa. We were 17 people, only because, you know, you invite your network and people who've said they wanted to do this before to you. So goodwill, benchmarking, and innovative, and we did dream big. 6 of the 17 founding members are in the room. You can see them from all the various disciplines. In the founding meeting, there were a couple of outcomes. You can look at our website to see the vision, mission, and statements, and we also had a 3-year strategic framework. Very importantly, our values are articulated on the website: excellence, transparency, integrity, and ethical practice, independence, impartiality, inclusion, diversity, and equality. So anything that we do in AFSA, this is what we go back to, because that is what we decided. It's also written like that in our constitution. So we then formed interim executive, was elected at the founding meeting, 5 of us, to literally build this structure of AFSA. And so I credit Prof. Mehdi Ben Khalil, who is the vice president of the IE, Carolina Kavayisa, who is, so Mehdi is from Tunisia, I'm from South Africa, Carolina is from Rwanda, Peter Paul is from Botswana, and Liam Robinson is from South Africa also. So we have 3 DNA experts, a forensic pathologist and a forensic odontologist on board. And so we are currently building AFSA. So pre-AFSA, we was just all of this discussion. The founding happened, the IE was tasked. We then registered AFSA as an international NGO, and I will show you our certificate because we are very proud of it in a moment. We are hosted in Kigali in Rwanda by the Rwanda Forensic Laboratory, the RFL, and I'll talk more about them later. In March 2023, we launched at the ASFM meeting, the African Society for Forensic Medicine meeting, also that was fortunately held in Kigali. We signed up members. From the get-go, there was media interaction, and I will tell you a story in a moment. This network is already proving incredibly helpful. Somebody texting, listen, do you know of an expert in XYZ country? And I can immediately text back, let me check the database. Yes, I can point you to a ballistics expert there. And our website is there. And if you go to the table out front, there's this little flyer which has all of our deets on it. All right, so the database, that's the QR code for it. Practitioners, this is what we want to do for you. We want to build this network. We want to point you to training connections. Yes, we do plan to have an AFSA journal in the future because the aim is to highlight in Africa. I'm always the African at international meetings standing up, hey, you're forgetting about Africa. And then I sat back and I thought, what am I doing to make us visible to the rest of the world? And then I got kind of a quiet moment with myself. Okay, Antonella, there's some work to be done. So then we organize ourselves, then we have a voice, and then we tell the international community, as we are now doing. The international, the IAFS is on board with us. The American Academy is very supportive of us. Other academies are reaching out. So now we must make sure that we use this voice for our forensic practitioners in Africa. We do plan to have an Africa-wide survey, and I'm kind of embarrassed at the point where I am in my career, and you can see the gray in the hair, right? I'm not the beginning at my career. Somebody will say, do you know this and this happening in Africa? I'm like, no, I'm unaware. Anyway, the reason why AFSA exists is so that we can now start to see what do we have, who do we have, where are they practicing? So a far and wide survey will also come to you. A part of what AFSA will do, must do, is to highlight the African successes. We have incredible expertise. I'm not the first one to say it in the last 2 days. Incredible expertise in Africa. But we're not highlighting this. We're not telling our stories, right? So people don't know about us. We don't know about each other. You can see the rest of the slide is there. For labs, our aim is to help you to generate valid scientific data so that that goes to court, so that your labs are sustainable and that they ultimately can become accredited to an international standard. Your and my idea of what the African network looks like may be a little bit different, But it must be a network for all forensic science practitioners in Africa, and then to make this excellence in Africa known to the world. I'm not going to go into the ethics document of AFSA, only to say, please go and look at the code of conduct. It's key to the core values of AFSA. Vincent was just saying, what do you do before you have formal regulation? You should be a responsible scientist, which includes self-regulation. I mean, this is basic science 101. And peer-to-peer, right? We are each other's peers. And if you do well, trust me, hey, I'm winning. And if AFSA does well, you are winning. So I'm not going to go into the components of the ethical conduct. We don't have time for that. This is our website. We decided to start really with the basics. How do we define what is forensic science? How do you define it? How do I define it? We very quickly realized we all define it differently. So we have now in AFSA adopted the Sydney Declaration, which you can also get a hold of on the website, which tells you exactly what forensic science is as defined by AFSA. Yes, it's adopting that until we formulate our own. I raised my hand in the room and I said, I want to start even more basic than that. I want to ask the question, how do we define African? You get why I'm asking it, right? Because I'm not a Black African, I'm a white African. So who's going to see me as African and who's not going to see me as African? We decided, as we adopted the Sydney Declaration, to then go back to the African Union, who have debated these issues ad nauseum. They have very clear definitions. So AFSA adopted the definition of African from the African Union. You have to be born in Africa and be born from African parents or other legal ways of obtaining African citizenship. All right, at the launch of AFSA, which happened in March this year, please read about it on our website soon. The Minister of Justice of Rwanda was very kind to do the launch for us. And here he is standing between myself and then Prof. Mehdi Ben Khalil, unveiling the logo of AFSA. For us, it was a proud moment because, as Stephen said, between December and March, it doesn't sound, it sounds longer than what it felt, but just coming to a logo and saying, okay, we have something that we think can work, it was interesting. Then we had an interactive session with people around us. We engaged with the media from the start, which was, I feel at this point, in the beginning of my career, I said no to the media. No comment was my standard answer. Now I understand. Professionals talk to each other, but the media speaks to society. So if I want society to understand forensic science, guess what I have to do? I have to become media savvy. Is it comfortable for me as a scientist? No. Is it something I must do? Yes. So the media was so incredibly supportive of us trying to help them navigate that they said we should please present a media workshop for them so that they can learn about appropriately reporting in forensic science. So I'm going to move on. AFSA in the press. So yes, we are African-wide. I don't speak Kinyarwanda. I can recognize AFSA and I can recognize my own name. Fortunately, Google Translate gets you quite far. So who creates narrative? This is the scientist, the legal and the media issue. So what it takes in reality is expect miscommunication in the beginning, expect misquotes, unintentional mostly, I think. Media deadlines are different to what we used to. Get yourself media smart, and that will also be included in that webinar with the media. AFSA currently uses English is our main language. Our website is available in Arabic, English, French, and Swahili currently. We are hosted by the RFL. I'm moving through the details you can read up. I have to acknowledge Dr. Charles Karangwa, who is the Director General of the RFL. AFSA is incredibly well supported by the RFL. We could not have been where we are without Charles and his team. This is Mehdi and Charles greeting each other at the RFL. We are registered by the RGB, the Rwanda Governance Board. This is our certificate. I'm just conscious of the time. We immediately said formal registration, formal bank account, etc. All of this has to happen so that we are diligent and tell members how we operate. So please go and look at our membership. You can read about it online. Full members, there are associate members, students, affiliate members, honorary members. You cannot apply to be honorary member, you cannot apply to be a founding member, but for the rest you can all apply. We represent all of these fields that are in the banner. Please go and check them out. Something that I must mention is everybody that knows me knows that I'm also attached to the South African Academy of Forensic Sciences. I used to be the chair. I'm no longer the chair, I just stepped off. So, but you already have SAFS. Why AFSA? SAFS is the South African Academy of Forensic Sciences. AFSA cannot interfere in any country. Let's say we see that there's a problem in DNA legislation in South Africa. The only thing that AFSA can do is tell SAFS that we have seen an issue. So these are the differences between these entities. We work across Africa. They are only in South Africa, and there is a confusion between the African Society for Forensic Medicine was started by forensic pathologists. I understand that now also includes scientists, but I'm just saying that is the difference. SAFS, I give you a little plug about SAFS because soon you will hear about Heat of the Year. Willie, who is in the audience, he's the current director of SAFS. Why would AFSA not celebrate a success in SAFS? I mean, SAFS success is AFSA success, is your success, is my success. So legal systems and frameworks are critical. We encourage the use of it, and we plan to support it in the future. Please sign up as a member. Currently, this is not the full membership list, but we just, we also have Australian members and a few other African countries. This is me signing up Stephen and Mehdi as members of AFSA, Old School with Paper. The website, I have to acknowledge the ICT Chamber of Rwanda, who did so free of charge for us. Please go and have a look at our website. These are all of our social media handles. Please contact us and join us. Our goals, your goals with forensic science and our goals are aligned. None of us can do this by ourselves, but if we work together, we can do it, we will do it, and I'm saying to you, we are doing it. So create awareness of forensic sciences, use forensic science to create solutions for Africa. That is how we restore two things: trust in forensic sciences and rebuild the fabric of society. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Antonelle. A great initiative, and there's also a table outside for more information that I'm sure you've all seen if you haven't already signed up. We're going to do a slight shift in the program because I feel like we've all just eaten lunch. We're going to have Tim next, then we're going to go and we're going to grab a cup of coffee, and we're going to come back and we're going to sit back and relax because we're going to then let Gerard tell us about the fascinating Thabo Bester case, which we all want to hear, this sort of never before heard snippets of what happened before the event. Are you all okay with that, or do you want to have a break now and then come back for the last two? Should we carry on? Okay, I think so. I feel like we're on a roll here. Sorry, Tim, but you're a lawyer. You can think on your feet. Many of you may not know this, but Tim is actually my boss. And I have two hats. I'm a consultant that works for GTH DNA, and part of my work, I don't know what that noise is. Oh, so sorry. I thought it was the speaker. Part of the work that I do is I work as a consultant in Africa to help administrations with developing DNA legislation. DNA for Africa is sort of a brand and a movement that I created because I really felt that we needed to represent African expertise in the forensic arena, and this networking and this platform that DNA for Africa has become, as I always say, we are DNA for Africa, is really as a result, as a spin-off of that. And let me tell you, if you ever want a boss, you want Tim. You are awesome. He gives me such autonomy. He gives me space to do what I have to do. He puts up with me. Not a lot of people can do that. And as I said earlier, he really is a global expert. I have learned so much from him in terms of the value of forensic DNA. He's patient, he's kind. He always says, I'm not a humanitarian, but you truly are. You go around the world and you exemplify the real value of what DNA can do in both humanitarian as well as justice efforts. And I really thank you for being that person and for all the work that you do. He also presents this incredible program called DNA Hit of the Year, which has been running for, well, Tim will tell you a little bit about it. And we actually presented it in Cairo together last year, which was great fun. And I'm excited to say that one of our South Africans, Willie Fache, who's here, thank you to ICRC for bringing him, was in the run-up in terms of the work that he did in his case for DNA Hit of the Year. So this is a really exciting presentation. Sit back, listen to all these amazing cases that Tim's going to present. And hopefully next year, I'm pretty sure it's going to be running again, some of the other African countries will be able to put forward their cases in the run-up to being featured as DNA Hit of the Year. So thanks, Tim, and welcome to Cape Town. And I'm sorry about the dreadful weather. We were supposed to go walking up mountains, and well, here we are. Thank you.
Okay, well, as you heard this morning, I had the event in my room last night with the deep flood, and the hotel left a bottle of wine this afternoon for me to say sorry for the inconvenience. So it all worked out well. But having to tread through a foot of water at 2 in the morning, I guess it was worth it. All right, so as Vanessa said, we're with GTH DNA. And we do a lot of things around the world. We work with policymakers, law enforcement, prosecutors, parliaments, ministries, everybody that needs information as they move forward DNA databases throughout the world. But one of the things we've done along the way is that because we're privy to all the cases going on, taking advantage of these databases, we thought, wouldn't it be great to create a program where the countries submit their cases to us throughout the year. We review them, we impanel a panel of judges from around the world, we rank them in order usually, and we name a selected case, and we celebrate that by presenting the Hit of the Year program every year at the HIT program, which is sponsored by Thermo Fisher Scientific. So they sponsor us to put that program on. So great program, and the world can learn by real cases why DNA databases are so awesome at solving crime, preventing crime, exonerating the innocent, and saving the government money, as one of the speakers alluded to earlier today. So that's our logo, DNA Hit of the Year. And again, these are the countries in the world that we determine have DNA databases based on legislation and have been implemented on a national basis, on a routine basis. Automatically, people go in when they're convicted or arrested for certain crimes. So there's about 60 of them. And these are the countries where usually we get our cases from. And why do we do this? One, it brings recognition, not just to you all, the crime lab people and the law enforcement investigating the cases, but the governments that pass these laws and the ministries that fund them. That's what we want to bring recognition to through this program. And of course, the victims and their families that use DNA to bring justice to their cases. And we want to bring awareness through DNA Hit of the Year, because while there is 60 countries that have implemented national databases, there's over 100 that haven't. And through these real cases, we can help bring this awareness to countries and actually get action, because when they see these cases in action, these ministers and parliaments tend to move forward with the policies and the budgets that create your databases. So what I was going to do today is just walk you through. We've done this for 7 years now. I've just picked out a few cases to explain to you today from the program. And we'll walk through that. And we'll start with one that was from our first year, 2017, a terrible rape homicide that happened in 1990 in the state of Florida, USA, where a mother had a young daughter, 12 years old, went out on a date with a boyfriend, only gone from her house for about 3 hours. And the babysitter was babysitting her 12-year-old. When she came back, the daughter and the babysitter had been brutally raped and murdered just in the 3 hours time. And it had never been solved. They started their DNA database mid-1990s, no matches. So just a terrible, in a small coastal town, it was very depressing. But one day, this individual right here was at a shopping mall in Florida, and he spit on a security guard because he got in his way. Anyway, the Florida legislature, our version of a parliament, passed a law that any low-level assault, like spitting, you go into the database. So he went into the database, and boom, after 20-some years, they got the hit, bringing closure to this case, an amazing hit, and an example of sometimes you have to wait. You set up your database, your offender may not be in there, but over time, they might get arrested or convicted and go into the database, and that's exactly what happened here. The second case I'll mention, this case is another US case. It came to us, I believe that was submitted in 2018. It was the murder of Heather Hoffman in Colorado in central United States. And this case is about what you can become with a well-robust and quick and well-funded database like the state of Colorado has. So this woman right here worked at McDonald's. She was coming to her son, she was a single mother living in an apartment in this town. And on the walk home, she was murdered by an individual, and which is this individual. But let me tell you the DNA story about this case. So she was murdered on June 21st. They actually the police came to the crime scene, gathered the evidence, and submitted it to the lab within a couple days on June 24th. On June 26th, the crime lab, that means just 2 days after it came into the lab, they developed a full profile, no hits in the state database, and they already had 11 suspects that they were interrogating and interfering in their lives. They quickly released those 11 people, didn't get the hit on the person they wanted, but the next day, on the 28th, they submitted it to the FBI's national database, and they hit to the individual because he was in the database, in the Kentucky database, a different state for a different crime. All right, then they arrested him that evening, and the suspect pled guilty a few months later. So that shows you how these databases can move quickly if you have the resources to test DNA quickly and get somebody like off the street. Because somebody that did a stranger rape homicide on somebody on an evening walking home from their job is likely to do it again. So you probably saved a lot of other people from being victims of crimes as well. Okay. All right, the third case I'll mention, and Bob, this is a case I was thinking about. I couldn't remember the name of it, but at dinner the other night, but it's a famous United Kingdom case. The sexual assault and murder of Melanie Road in Bath, United Kingdom. And Bath, of course, is in the southwest corner of the UK. Beautiful place, a lot of people vacation there. So this young lady was walking home on June 84 from a night out with her friends. She was brutally attacked only 200 meters from her home, so she was just about home. And what happened, somebody had a knife. She actually turned the knife around on the offender and cut him pretty badly, and he bled on the crime scene, but she ultimately succumbed to the attack and died. So because there was a lot of blood, because she fought back so hard, that was the primary evidence that was collected. Of course, this was the same year Alex Jeffries published a paper on DNA being able to identify us between each other, but they had not used DNA yet. So they were basically focused on blood types. All right. As I mentioned, this is a huge case in the UK, one of the most investigated ever there. These are just some of the stats from the case. They never gave up. They tried for years and years to get a match, but they didn't. So let's walk through that DNA story. So in 1995, of course, we've heard it multiple times today, UK became the first country in the world to have the database. They put that blood into that database and there was no hits. In 2011, UK became the first country with a national program for familial searching. And it's a very good program that UK has. You have to follow many, many privacy programs and familial searching. You have to apply to a panel to get approval to do it. And they did that in 2011, but they didn't get a match. They tried it again, familial searching application to the panel, and they got approval, and again, no hits in 2013. 2014 was the year that they had the big break. And what happened here is the daughter of the killer that left the blood at the crime scene pushed a roommate in UK and a necklace. That in UK is an assault, and you're allowed to go into the database for that. She did. Okay, so now the killer's daughter is in the database. They did another familial search application in 2015, and sure enough, the daughter, that's who you're going to come up on your candidate list first. She came up first of 200 candidates. The police investigated her, found this guy, made the arrest in June of 2015. So, great case, wonderful result. Again, the heroes are the lab and the law enforcement that never gave up. But again, let's give some credit to the government. Why? Because the United Kingdom's parliament decided that everybody goes into the database for any type of an assault, even for an arrest, like shoving somebody in your apartment, and the ministries that allowed for the familial searching program to take place. Without that, this individual never would have been caught. Okay, so let's move on to, this was our actual #1 selected case in 2017. It's the murder of Yara Gambriosio in the north central Italy. For those of you that want to learn more about this case after I summarize it, a couple years after we did the program, Netflix did a full-fledged movie on this case. So if you Google Netflix Yara Gambriosio, you'll find the movie. I've watched it, it's pretty good, and might be entertaining to see this case further explained. Okay, so there's where her murder occurred in Italy, up in the central north region, another beautiful place. So this is Yara, was I believe a 13-year-old young girl, very active, did a lot of gymnastics, and she went missing on November 2010. They found, there's the search party from the crime that was doing the search. They found her in February of 2011. And the evidence at the crime scene was basically there was a full YSTR profile found in her underwear, which means, of course, if you figure out who belongs to this, the STR profile, you find out who belongs to this STR profile, you're going to know who the killer is. So that became the focus of the investigation. The problem in Italy is back then, they had not yet passed or implemented their DNA database law, right? So that didn't stop them. They decided to create an instant DNA database. So they went out in the community and found every young man in the region, 15,000 of them, to donate under consent their DNA so they can see if they can get a match or do a lot of elimination. They did that, but there were no direct hits. They then decided to see if they would get any familial hits. So they did that in the summer of 2012, and they got a match. They got a match to a young man who's not the killer, but it was a familial match, so they wanted to start the investigation on him. So of course, the investigators went first to the father. The father was not a match to the killer. So then they said, okay, how many siblings does the father have? That's where we'll go next. He had 9. Big Catholic family in Italy, so they had to go get all the DNA from them. None of them matched. They found out that there was a deceased sibling. His name was Giuseppe, and they had to go get Giuseppe's DNA, but he was dead, right? And he was cremated. So basically, one of the detectives said, let's go to his home, look around, maybe we'll see something that he left, even though he's been dead for quite some time. Sure enough, the
The investigators, one of them opened up a drawer and found a letter that Giuseppe had written to his wife about 20 years earlier. And they concluded that, boy, if we take that stamp off that letter, he probably licked the stamp and we can get his DNA there. And that's what they did. And they got a full profile of Giuseppe. And what they found out is Giuseppe is not the killer, but the scientists were able to conclude that it was definitely the killer was going to be one of Giuseppe's children. All right. So now you just got to go find Giuseppe's children. Okay, he had 3 known children. So they gathered up his DNA of the 3 kids, and none of them matched. All right, so what's going on here, right? Everyone know, right? Giuseppe had a secret kid. All right, so that's what we're doing here. So of course, the police said, well, let's go find the mother. Shouldn't be too hard. I mean, you had an affair. The family probably knew about it, but they didn't. The family didn't know about the affair. The community didn't know about the affair, and nobody was talking about it. So what they thought they would do is basically, okay, well, you couldn't have had that many girlfriends. Let's go find them, do the investigation, we'll figure it out. However, he apparently had a lot of girlfriends. So anyway, so they had to go out and profile 532 women. They volunteered to give their DNA. And sure enough, it worked. It matched to Esther in 2014. All right, scientists said, yes, the child is going to belong to Esther. She had 3 kids, so they got their DNA, and yes, one of them matched. He was the killer. And here he is. He was arrested on June 16th. And as typical in Italy, lots of media about cases and hear that. So again, it's a fun movie to watch, pretty much on pace to what I explained here. But yeah, you can see why the judges selected this case as the top case that year. Okay, Bruce mentioned this case Monday in your training. This is the genetic genealogy case, the Golden State Killer. So this may be a little bit repetitive, but I think I added some more facts to it, which we'll go through. So this case is, I think Bruce mentioned, it was really 3 different crime sprees. It was one in the 70s in Central California where he was basically a burglar. He committed 120 burglaries and 1 murder. He then moved up to San Francisco area where he committed 50 stranger sexual assaults and 2 murders. And then he moved down to Los Angeles where he was known as the Night Stalker, where he committed 10 more murders and many more sexual assaults. So altogether, this person is known as the Golden State Killer. Okay, so this person was a bad dude. I mean, he was a terrible predator. He would taunt his victims. He would get in there and wait hours before he'd actually rape them. He'd tie them up, taunt them. It was just a terrible thing. It caused the community to get very upset, obviously. All these rapes were happening one after another, sometimes days or weeks after another. On that side of the screen, you see the police explaining to the crowd, we're working on this, stay calm, we're gonna get this guy. But he was out there for so long, there were 4 or 5 different generation of police officers working on the case, and they're pictured on the right, and there's a book about the case. Okay, so the DNA path in this case, when DNA came along in the late 80s in the United States, they were able to link these 3 crime scenes together. So they knew that all 3 crime sprees belonged to the same person. Then California turned on its DNA database about 1997, 98. They put them in CODIS, but no hits. Then an interesting thing happened. The brother of one of the victims was very wealthy. And he went to the Congress of we call them state legislators in California, and said, we're not getting any hits because we have a terrible database. You only put sex offenders and violent offenders in our database, and our hit rate's about 5%. We want to be like United Kingdom, where the hit rate's 50%, put everybody in the database in California that convicted or arrested any crime. And the legislature there said, no, we're not going to do that. So he said, okay, I'm wealthy, I have money, I'm going to bankroll what we call a citizens initiative, where you take the law to the people to vote, not through the state legislature. And it passed overwhelmingly in California. The voters wanted it. But even with that, and even with California becoming the 5th largest DNA database in the world after that law passed, still no hits in the government database. They tried familial matching, they tried YSDRs, they tried everything else. Even after 2 decades, still no hits. So as we were talking about earlier, the detectives got creative and introduced us to the world of genetic genealogy with this case. And you've heard of the hobby that the Americans have. We take our DNA, we put it into a database or send it off to a company like 23andMe. They test it, and then you get an email back saying, these are all your cousins. And then you can connect with them on Facebook and things like that. It's a weird thing we do in the US, but anyway. But there's other companies that do this too, all right? Now, the police in the United States can't get into these databases. They thought about it, like, oh, wouldn't we take an unsolved case and put it in these companies' databases? No judge in the United States, at least I hope not, would allow a police officer into those databases, okay, because there's not a connection. They're fishing for something, all right? However, what happened is the people that all submit to these things said, oh, I'll just put my DNA voluntarily into a public database. And they called it this thing called GEDmatch, where now there's a public database where you voluntarily put your DNA into these things. And the cops in this case said, I don't need a warrant for that, or I don't need to go to a judge, I'll just do it. And they put the DNA into that thing, and sure enough, they hit to a distant relative, and then they worked through the genealogy, and they were able to figure out who was the Green or the Golden State Killer. And that's how they did it. So it's an amazing thing. And here he is being arrested in April 2018. And when this happened, I mean, I've been dealing with forensic databases since 1998 when I first met Bruce. And I didn't think, I had no idea this was possible. I mean, you were probably thinking about it because you were thinking of the science. From a policy level, I thought it was shocking. And sure enough, so did a lot of police chiefs in the United States, because they said, oh my gosh, we're going to take all these unsolved cases with DNA that have never been solved, and they started running it against this magic portal called genetic genealogy. And within months, all these huge cases that have never been solved have been solved. And that's the magic of genetic genealogy. Okay, we have one more case from the past, and this is a case that was submitted to us, I believe, in 2019, and it was from Guangzhou, China. All right, and in this case, you had a mother and daughter in a very upscale neighborhood in Guangzhou in their condo. Somebody came in and murdered them. They left DNA behind. Now, somebody said earlier that China has 60 million profiles in their database. I actually know that it's higher than that. I think it's about 75 now, so it's huge. Still, when they put that DNA in the database, in the STR database, there were no hits. All right. But in addition to that STR database, I told you earlier today that China is one of the 4 countries that's also built a YSTR database. So over a period of time, China went out between 2010 and 2020 and put 10 million people, criminal offenders and others that volunteer, into this YSTR database. All right, and sure enough, they arrested somebody for a minor crime, and it hit to the killer. Now, June was not the killer, but he had the same YSTRs, which mean the killer was probably a brother, father, somebody like that, right? So the cops, the police then said, okay, if it's not June, let us go to the father and the 5 uncles and get their DNA and check it against the STR. And it didn't match. However, weird thing happened. They said they figured out that the father, the 5 uncles, and June are all half siblings to the killer. All right. So what does that mean? Strange thing going on in the family there. We've got a grandfather and a mother of June, obviously created a child, okay? And so the police figured that out. Then through the investigation, they were able to find out where they adopted this person and we were able to arrest him in the Guangzhou airport, and he pled guilty to the crime. So very unique case that year. All right, so that is just a sampling of some of our cases. This year, 2023 hit of the year, if any of you saw it, Vanessa mentioned it. It was in Cairo. It was great, the video that was played on the HIDS conference. We decided that we had 6 finalists. Cases from 2 in the US. There was one from Colorado, or Denver, Colorado, US. There was one from Florida. There was one from Spain, one from Bahrain, a great bomb case, and one jewelry heist case from Malaysia. And the 6th case was actually here from for Willie's case. I can never say the name of your town, Brokensprut. Okay, all right. So when we looked at those cases this year, for a number of reasons, we decided this year to basically make them all the top cases. So there were 6 2023 DNA hit of the years this year. So I encourage you to go to the DNA hit of the year website where you can navigate to find the video, or go to the HIDS website where you can watch the video as well and watch these cases. But I thought we'd bring Willie up real quick because we were able to because we did this virtually, we mailed the plaques to all the other 5 winners, but I thought since I was coming here that I'd actually give Willie the plaque, and let me put this down real quick. Now, Willie, stay up here real quick. Okay, so how am I doing on time? I got 2. Am I over? Yeah. Okay, so this case is a unique case, and it really is a tribute to your hard work to after this case, set the case up to the evidence up, not keep the body from being buried as long as you could. So I thought I'd just turn it over to Willie for the last 2 minutes, and he could just give you a quick summary of this case, and we're just thrilled that we were able to do this, and you submitted this year, and thanks again.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity and for the award and for this. From the beginning, I said this was not me alone, but it was a team effort. It started from the scene where the police activated us, where our members collected the body and put the body in a body bag. And then with the pathologist and the police being at the post-mortem, requesting samples, pathologists taking that sample, and then sending samples to the DNA lab for South Africa. And luckily, we had legislation that then let somewhere else in South Africa take a bugle sample of the suspect that was arrested a few months later for the kidnapping of Linda Mattate. So that's just what I want to begin with. But the year was Linda Mattate. She was actually a young girl of 21, and she went out to a party, and the next morning, the mother tried to contact her, but she couldn't get hold of her. And the mother was adamant to trace her daughter. She did her own investigation, opened a missing persons at the closest police station. But nothing came up. Only after a few months after she did her own investigation, she said this is a kidnapping. And the suspect is actually a cash and transit heist person that the police was looking for. So they arrested this person for the kidnapping of Linda Mattate. And then we actually collected the body. And what happened is the sexual assault kit that we collected from the body actually hit with the bugle sample of the suspect. Linda was at our facility for almost a year. And like our members of Western Cape said, that we are allowed to dispose of unhuman remains after 30 days. But we did not decide to bury these remains because we felt in our hearts that this lady had a family and we were looking for her. So we were adamant not to bury her and let the family look at her. After this hit, the investigating officer of the kidnapping case then started searching where was this sexual assault kit taken. He went to FPS Pretoria and asked them if there's a mortuary in the east of Pretoria. And they said, yes, Bronkhorstspruit. That day, the investigating officer contacted me and said, yes, we still have Linda's, the body's remains. And he contacted Linda's mother. The next day, he brought it to us. I told her, but these human remains are not very visible. But she was adamant to see the remains. We showed it to her and she started crying and saw the facial features. And after that, we collected the DNA of Linda, of the deceased, the DNA of the mother, and after 2 to 3 days, it was put at high priority, and that hit came back, and that body could have been handed over to Linda's mother. And with ease, she said, thank you that you didn't bury my loved one, that I could get closure at the end of the day. And that's what I said, being the voice of the voiceless, and forensic pathology service officers with pathologists, with police, we can make a difference. And we can make a difference in the criminal procedures and also be humanitarians at the same time. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Willie. Appreciate it. I just want to say, please, if you have cases, submit it to our program. Even if they don't get in the finalist list, they're put on our website, shared around the world, and helps people learn about utilize DNA and DNA databases. So thank you for your time, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tim. And yeah, I love listening to cases. It's especially after you've had a sort of a day of presentations. Cases are just like you can relax and you can apply everything and think about how it could apply in different scenarios. Just before tea, because we've got to come back, I've just, when we recorded the DNA hit of the year, we recorded Willie in a mortuary here in Cape Town, an empty one. It was a repatriation one. I've been in a mortuary once. I don't know if Lorna's still around, and never again. Once when I did forensics. But I want to just, can we play this recording, because I still laugh when I see it. This is Willie.
Excuse me, this was eerste keer.
You've got to hear it from the beginning. Is it possible? Okay.
I think that was a good take. Excuse me, this was eerste keer.
And that's Willie after being recorded for the first time. He goes, yeah, that was a good take. Anyway. Thanks, Willie. So in order to keep up with time, because that's coming on at 4 o'clock sharp, get your coffee, grab your cake, come back, sit down, and we'll introduce Gerard and the fascinating Thabo Bester case. So we'll see you shortly.